Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us for this segment, we have Ryan McCormack, Factor and Core Equity Strategist at Invesco, for a review of weekly performance in the Nasdaq-100. Ryan, it's great to see you as always, and it's been a busy week for the Nasdaq-100.
Yeah, I think when you're looking at the weekly performance, you have QQQ and QQQM up of 43 basis points against the S&P 500, which was down 36 basis points. S&P 500 value was the biggest underperformer, down 0.85% or 85 basis points. We saw a strong move to the upside on Wednesday. That was largely driven by comments of Fed Chair Powell. QQQ rallied nearly 4.6% for the session. Other than that, not really necessarily any huge surprises on the economic front. You had an ADP employment report that was well below estimates. That was followed by a non-farm report that was much higher than anticipated. So status quo employment picture continues to be rather cloudy as unemployment rates hovers around 3.7%. And then we saw the second reading of Q3 GDP coming in slightly better than estimates at 2.9%.
Yep. Good news is bad news and vice versa, and everyone's kind of in a holding pattern until we get into next week, where of course we'll have the FOMC rate decision. But Ryan, I want to pull up that one-day chart of the Qs from that Wednesday where we saw that massive move at 130.
Yeah, so the daily chart on 11:30, you can really look right at 1:30 when Chairman Powell began his speech. That's the exact moment that Qs started to rally. So right, no surprise, the Fed has been driving and continues to drive equity markets. I mean, if you look at during his speech, really nothing new was said. Right, he talked about how it made sense to moderate the pace of rate hikes. It may come as soon as the December meeting, and then ultimately continues to remind markets that the pace of rate hikes, it's not as important as the terminal rate, right? So how long the Fed will hold interest rates at elevated levels. And further, so some commentary that we've heard before cautions about the effects of their rather hawkish stance, their tightening so far haven't necessarily worked themselves into the economy, and caution that they don't want to over tighten. However, cutting rates really isn't on the table. But again, this is all stuff that he's reiterated over the past number of weeks, previous comments, previous speeches. But I think as we inch closer to this December Fed meeting, the market has more and more confidence that it's a 50 basis point hike as he continues to reiterate these thoughts.
And Ryan, let's take a look at sector performance here.
Yeah, so we saw a rally from technology, given it's by far the largest sector weight in QQQ. That was the biggest contributor to relative performance. We also saw positive contribution from communication services, up nearly 2% for the week in QQQ, and it's the second largest overweight. Relative performance was also aided after energy stocks and financial stocks were under pressure this week. Energy was down nearly 6% in the S&P 500. Financials down over 2.75% in the S&P, and QQQ doesn't have exposure to those sectors. From a company perspective, Baidu and JD.com were the best two performing stocks in the Nasdaq-100, and Pinduoduo was the fifth best performing. This is on kind of continued optimism around the relaxation of China's COVID policy. So we saw a loosening of restrictions on Friday. We saw an announcement today of further relaxation of policies, including, I think, domestic travel, some ability to quarantine at home. So, I think we're trying to read the tea leaves with some of these Chinese stocks that have been battered down on continued relaxation of those policies. And then, as we look ahead to next week, we have the release of the November PPI on Friday. Tuesday, we see the November CPI, and then Wednesday, the big day with the Fed decision at the December meeting.
All right, Ryan, appreciate the insight as always. Thanks for joining us on Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.